Today's program is by Mark Lefebvre. Did you say Lefebvre? Okay.
Beautiful.
Who also writes under the name Mark Leslie. He is award-winning author of more than 30 books, including humorous urban fantasy adventures, true ghost stories, 80s movie trivia guides, anthologies, and nonfiction handbooks for writers. A pioneer in digital publishing, he has worked in the book industry since 1992, serving as president of the Canada Booksellers Association, director of the self-publishing and author relations for, how'd you tell me that one name?
Just say Kobo.
Kobo, and director of business development for Digital 2, or Draft 2 Digital, among other roles. So I will let you take it away, Mark, and I will count. Oh, we might have another person.
Oh, this is exciting. Come on in. Come on in. I mean, unless they saw me and went, oh, that guy. That happens.
No, they don't.
Okay.
They're looking for
All
the
right.
session they're looking for.
Well, I'm gonna start. So you guys can get started. All right.
Oh, come on. Yes, please do.
Excellent. Excellent. Lots of seats. All right. All right. So I'm not gonna go through this. This is just a bit of a background, but this is also an exercise in author branding. Okay. So one of the things you'll notice is I'm handing an award to Margaret Atwood, kind of a well-known. I'm sure we've all heard of that author, and hand it on television programs, different speaking in events. When I write horror, I travel with Barnaby Bones and stuff like that. That's just a bit of an exercise in author branding, which is I'm actually working on a book on that right now. But I have been working in the industry since 1992. That was when my very first short story was published. It's also when I started working in the book industry as a bookseller. And I've since worked in various guises and roles. I embrace traditional publishing and self-publishing because I believe that's the best way to optimize all the streams of income, take advantage of all the opportunities you have. And just high-level basic premise so you understand the gist of who I am, besides a bald guy who likes craft beer and 80s movies. But being open to all the possibilities to help you with multiple income streams. Because it used to be that you could rely on huge advances. A good friend of mine, Robert J. Sawyer, who's here, used to be able to live on the advances he got from big publishers. Can't do that anymore. Now he has to split his rights. Now he has to work with big publishers, small publishers, get slightly smaller advances from different companies, and self-publishing, and also doing some other forms of income, which we'll talk about. But there are more formats in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophies, Horatio. So that's an important aspect, is it's not just necessarily about the print book, and it's not even necessarily about the book, because as writers, as storytellers, there are various other adjacent things you can do leveraging your storytelling and writing skills. And that's another important aspect we'll get into. But I also want to embrace a new mindset, because there was always this vision that self-publishing was, oh, I couldn't get a real publisher, therefore I had to do it myself. But it was not really about rejection. It's about control, taking back control, and it's about choice. In the cases, for example, there are some authors who want to write more than one book a year, and with most traditional publishers, they will not do more than one book a year. So if you are capable of writing more and producing more, back in the day, speaking of Robert J. Sawyer, there he is. Come on in, guys. That there were writer friends of Robin and myself who used to, when they wanted to write more than one book a year, use pseudonyms, because publishers would not allow you to write more than one book a year under that one brand. And so that's really is taking that choice and taking that control back. And when done properly, sorry, I didn't mean to spit on you, Bill, but when done properly, the only self-publishing should be self-directed, not do everything yourself. And self-directed means you take all the responsibilities of a publisher, which means you hire designers, you hire the editor, you hire the professionals that you want to work with in order to produce the best book possible. That's what the self is self-directed. They have adapted indie authors to try and remove that negative stigma from self-publishing. And I've noticed that the self-publishing sphere is evolving in the exact same way that all the big publishers were. So apparently, Cherf and Knopfler were two guys in New York who wanted to publish a few books on the side at random. Became Random House, world's largest publisher. It was, again, evolving by doing niche publishing, passion publishing, etc. But this talk is based on something I've long said, is, well, what does it take to be a successful author, whether you're traditionally published or self-published? Well, it's patience, practice, and persistence. And it was a really cool thing to say at a bar because I could actually remember them, unlike last night when I couldn't remember all 7 of them. After having a couple of those really high, intense Michelob Lights, this altitude was too much for me. But it was a good start. But then I dug into it and I wondered, what were, based on my 30 years of experience in the industry, what were the common traits that I recognized and that I saw in both traditionally published authors and self-published authors? And so let's get into that. I ended up releasing this book, and here are the 7 Ps: this practice, professionalism, patience, progression, persistence, partnership, and patronage. And there's a bonus P, but I rounded it to 7 because 7's a nicer number than the 8 Ps of professional. It's based on, this is content, so you can see again that branding I was talking about earlier, trying to brand all of these very similarly. Now I normally write under Mark Leslie because nobody can usually pronounce Lefebvre without a lot of prompting and practice. But I got known in the industry as Lefebvre, so all my books about the business of writing and publishing had that name on it. So practice, let's get into just some examples there. This is one of my favorite quotes about writing from Hugh Prather, from one of his memoirs. If the desire to write is not accompanied by actual writing, then the desire is not to write. And that has been with me since the early 90s on a tack board, where I was paying, if I wanted to get writing done, I actually had to sit down and write. And so I focused that time, I made the time when I was working multiple jobs when I was just leaving university. And then when I finally got full-time work, I got up early and I tried to write. I couldn't, not necessarily every day, but I tried very, very hard to write every day. I remember commuting in from Hamilton to Toronto. I'm in Ontario, Canada. And I was on the GO train for an hour and a half every morning and every evening. Well, in the morning, this is before Wi-Fi was on commuter trains. In the morning, I'd open up my laptop and I would work on my writing in the morning. And in the first year of commuting to Toronto, I finished a book in that year by writing Monday to Friday. Usually not the full hour and a half, but usually about an hour to get that done. And that was practice, just continued at it. But the other things about practice are continuing to learn, continuing to get better. When you go to some workshops, at a conference like this, learning different aspects like dialogue and other elements of writing, characterization and stuff like that, constantly learning, constantly practicing. Professionalism is a really, really important aspect to it as well. And this is not just professionalism in your behavior. I'm going to go back to professionalism in understanding the contracts and the content. If you sign a contract with a publisher and you say you're going to deliver the first draft by a particular date, you hit that deadline. That's part of professionalism because it's like, yes, I like to work with you. For example, I pick on my friend Rob all the time, but when Rob was recently signed a deal with Audible, an audiobook company, where they gave him a really nice advance for one of his recent works. The question was, he pitched something to them, and then in the process, it takes years of back and forth where they finally decide, but by the time they decided upon this project, it was already something that was popular, and Rob's like, well, that's not new anymore, I want to do something new. And he said, do you want the proposal I put in 3 years ago, or do you want to work with Rob Sawyer? And because of his professionalism and the brand he had built for himself over the years, and all the publishers and anyone in the industry knew who he was and that he was professional, they said, no, we don't care what you write, we want a Rob Sawyer book. And that's an element of professionalism. So Rob always hits his deadlines. Anyone he's worked with knows he's a professional, and people talk in the industry as well. When you're doing in-person appearances, people skills and stuff like that, it's really hard because a lot of us are introverts. I'm an omnivert. I'm not actually good at approaching people and talking to people and stuff like that. You put me on stage if I have a point, something to do, I'm good, or I think I'm good. I can do it, I'm comfortable with it, whatever, but if I walk into a room of a whole bunch of people, I'm not the kind of person who walk up and talk to a stranger. I'm just too awkward and shy about that. But if I have a goal, if I have a purpose, if I have something that I can focus on, then I can do it. I can pretend to be extroverted and stuff like that. And that's some of the tricks you may want to look at. And then also, how do you deal with adversity and rejection? Because I've been rejected thousands of times, not just my dating life, but rejected as a writer, right? The average was 13 rejections for every acceptance when I first started sending stories out. And that's not all that different no matter what you're doing, is that not everything's going to stick with everyone. So that professionalism is really an important aspect, is how do you deal with it? And as somebody who has edited anthologies, you know, when an editor comes back and says, hey, I read your story, it was really great. However, I already have another story like that I've selected for the anthology. And the ending felt like it could have used a little bit of work. But this is pretty good. You should try again at another market. The last thing you want to do, especially when you actually, if you ever get a response like that, that actually means the editor probably thought your writing was really good, but it just didn't work because they couldn't make it fit, is arguing with them. Because that's the surefire way that the next time I get a story from that writer who argued with me, I don't have time for this. I'm too busy reading the slush pile and thousands of submissions. That's the first time, the next time I see a story from that writer, I'm not even gonna give it a consideration, because this is a writer I don't want to work with because they didn't act professionally or they made my job harder than it was. And when you are editing, editors have a lot of stuff to sort through. They don't often have time to deal with some of those nuances as well. So how do you deal with adversity and rejection? Patience is the other thing. Patience is one of those elements that's really, really difficult. In traditional publishing, once you land an agent, it could take the agent years to sell a book to a publisher. Once you actually get a contract or an offer, or even when it's in negotiation, that process is not quick. And if you've signed a contract with a publisher, the process can take years. So that's one of the elements of traditional publishing. You have to be patient, waiting for those responses. Not saying, well, I sent you my manuscript yesterday, have you given me a reaction yet, and stuff like that. So that's one of the elements of it. And even in once the book is out in the world, having the patience with connecting with various people in the industry, like libraries and bookstores, like understanding that it's like 6 months sometimes to book with a local library because they do their schedule so far in advance. You can't just come in and say, hey, can I come in tomorrow and do an event? So that's one of the other elements, is being able to wait for that gratification. One of the elements, one of the studies I really enjoy is the Stanford marshmallow experiment. And I know there's some critique about the experiment because of the background of the people and where they came from. But in a nutshell, are you guys familiar with the marshmallow? Yeah, so it's kind of like they leave the marshmallow and they put the kid in the room and say, okay, there's one marshmallow there, I'm going to come back in 5 minutes. And you can have the marshmallow, or when I come back in 5 minutes, you can have 2 or 3 marshmallows. And he's like, ooh, what if I wait? Delayed gratification. And there was a combination between the delayed gratification and the success that these people saw years later because of that willingness to wait for it. And in the indie author world, the delayed gratification is often people. How many people are familiar with self-publishing and the Kindle Direct publishing platform? When you're self-publishing and you're just hitting refresh on the Amazon dashboard every 15 seconds, when you should be writing instead of focusing on that. And you can't help it. When you first launch a book, you want to see it or refreshing the item page so you can see if you're trending in your category or whatever. But I mean, and I say that because I've made all these mistakes. I end up wasting hours and hours. I was like, wow, you know how many thousands of words I could have written while I was hitting the refresh on the dashboard? And this is just a reminder. Look, Canada Post, you can tell I am not from the US. This is back in the old days of publishing. This was you mail your manuscript, and then you wait patiently for 6 to 9 months for the rejection to come in the mail, and then you would start it all over again. So that was the process of patience as well. And then progression. So this is not just working at something, but working at it in a popular way. So I'm a huge Rush fan, as is a requirement of many Canadians. Neil Peart was a drummer, and probably one of the world's best drummers, who was constantly working at his craft and getting better. I think he was 50 years old or 45 years old when he wanted to learn a completely different drum technique, and he went as somebody who had already won awards and accolades and platinum albums and all this stuff, and being admired by so many. Like Dave Grohl talks about Neil being an inspiration to him. Dave from the Foo Fighters. Neil went back and pretended he knew nothing and relearned from scratch the basics of how to hold the sticks and how to drum. And when I think the humility that it would take to say, okay, I'm one of the world's best drummers, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to assume I know nothing, and I'm going to learn from this amazing drum teacher I have a lot of respect for, that he could do something like that, inspires me continually that I can continue to do that. I actually went back after 30 years of work in the industry. I went back and got my publishing, my master's in creative arts with a focus on publishing. Because even though I've worked in the industry for 30 years, I know there's things I don't know and I want to continue to learn. The other thing is there's not a single person in this room that you can't learn something valuable from. Whether it's related to your writing, whether it's related to some other aspect to your life, whether it's related to the craft, the business, whatever. So there's always something we can always learn. And if we ever lose sight of that, we stop progressing, we stop growing as writers. Persistence. And this is from Palmer's, it's a lesson you should heed, try again. If at first you don't succeed, try again. And one of the things, if you've ever read the entire poem, is try again is repeated numerous times. And one of the things I've noticed in the industry is, because I've constantly given advice to authors about various elements, is sometimes it feels like I've said something 50 times, but it's usually not until the 8th or the 9th time that somebody picks up on it, which is why I'll often repeat myself and share it. Because if I say, hey, when you're self-publishing, you don't necessarily need to purchase an ISBN. You don't need to spend $150 on that. You may not be ready for that now, but maybe in a year or two when you're actually doing it, that's when you pay attention to that. So that's one of the reasons why, come on down, you're the next contestant. That's one of the elements of that repetition. And persistence is really important, is not giving up in the face of rejection. I had like 30 or 40 rejections on short stories that I would send to markets before I got an acceptance. I've published books to the wild accolade of cricket sounds, where nobody, not even my mom would buy the book and stuff. That's the persistence of not giving up in the face of adversity. It's important for your professionalism and how you react to that, but it's also so important not to give up. Let's be honest, you guys have dedicated your time to come here to this conference, to engage and network with other writers and to learn. You have stuff that's valuable and needs to be shared with the world. Do not give up on that. That is so, so critical. Please don't give up on yourself. But the other thing about persistence is persistence without progression, not necessarily the best thing. Like, I can't walk through this wall, right? And if I keep trying to walk through this wall, persistence is just going to hurt me. It's not going to help me. So, but then going, oh, there's a thing over there with a latch, and I saw some other people use it. Maybe I can learn how to get out of this room. But that's a really, really critical and important thing. Is okay? Sometimes if it's not working, maybe trying a different way to get to that, and looking at it, that's a really important aspect. So partnership is one of those most valuable aspects that I really, really enjoy. So partnership can come from co-authoring. It can come from working in the indie author space in bundles, like multi-author bundles or anthologies, where a whole bunch of us are part of it, so we're all promoting it together and helping the publisher. A collaborative back scratching. So again, if there's something that I know and I can help you with, maybe there's something that you know and you can help me with as well. Again, I always pick on Rob, especially when he's here in the room, but one of the things I love so much about Rob is constantly leveraging partnership in order to help other writers. At every single event I've been to with Rob, when Rob says, oh, you know something about this and you know something about this, you two need to talk. He's one of those, Seth Godin calls it a linchpin, who really creates powerful relationships and lifts and benefits other people with no desire to take anything for himself. And that alone is part of why people love working with Rob. Part of one of the things is like, wow, I know that Rob's going to probably introduce me to some cool people. That's just a thing that I've learned and I've tried to do as well over the years, as he's been a mentor to me continuously. Bundles are really great. Co-authoring is great because I can leverage different aspects of what skills we have together. I'm a pantser. I don't outline books. I've co-authored with people who don't write anything until it's vigorously outlined and whatever, and we didn't kill each other. I learned so much about the process of outlining, working with other writers. So here's an example of authors working together on a theme. So these, the Jewels of Historical Romance, I actually met around this time of the year in Florida about 10 years ago. It was 12 authors who all wrote historical romance, all independently. Some of them had been traditionally published. They started self-publishing when things weren't working out, like the advances were not as big as before. And they ended up getting together and doing, this is a box set, for example. But when I worked at Kobo, which is kind of like Canada's answer to Kindle, one of the ebook platforms in Canada, they would send a package, like a catalog that they created, of all the books from all their members. And I'd been in the book industry for years as a bookstore manager, and I would get similar packages from sales reps, from publishing companies saying, here's our catalog of titles that are coming out from this imprint and that imprint and the other imprint. And that's how I would decide what I was going to buy for my store. They would send this to all the major retailers, a catalog, like a glossy catalog with their books and stuff about the books in them. So what they did for their marketing spend is the 12 of them got together, each put in, let's say, $500 per quarter, and then they created this marketing. They also did a thing because part of their brand, the Jewels of Historical Romance, is they sent me a beautiful little treasure box, gorgeous treasure box that was engraved with their brand on it, and it was filled with Hershey's Kisses and a little sticker that said Kisses from the Jewels. And every quarter when they sent the catalog, they would send some sort of goodie to fill the treasure box with. So when I was working at Kobo, I was in the self-publishing, but they had merchandisers who decided what books would get featured. I would send a note to the merchandising team saying, swing by my desk and grab some goodies from the Jewels. And there was a pile of catalogs that they could all take so they could potentially feature. And I was thinking, they're working exactly the same way that sales reps work, but as independent authors. And they stick out in my mind. So when somebody says, do you know any good historical romance authors? I'm like, well, there's a website. Just Google the Jewels of Historical Romance. You're set, man. You got 12 authors with some amazing world-class stuff. This is an example of a book I co-authored, True Ghost Stories of Sudbury, Ontario, Sudbury, the nickel capital of the world. Jenny Jelen was a reporter interviewing me for my hometown newspaper about my first book on ghosts, Haunted Hamilton. And she said, would you ever be interested in writing a book about ghost stories? And I was like, of your hometown? And I said, no, I never thought of it. She says, well, you know, I've actually written a couple articles for the local paper about some haunted places. If you ever want to do it, why don't we do it together? And I'm thinking, ding, 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 ding. She works for the daily newspaper. Free advertising when this book comes out, right? Ironically, she quit the job by the time the book came out because working with me, she recognized I was following my passion, and I was really, passion's another P that doesn't work its way into this presentation, but hopefully you feel it throughout the whole presentation. She ended up, she's now in the horse business. She was a jumper and a rider, and now she's a coach. And so she quit the job. So we didn't actually end up getting to leverage it, although we were both so well known in our hometown that we leveraged it. But then I made some assumption errors. So the other thing too is like, oh, this is a writer. I'm going to co-author the book. We'll each write 50% of the book. It's half the work. Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. But the other thing too is she was writing for newspapers, and she's like, you write a chapter on this, and I write a chapter on this, and I write a chapter on this. And I went, oh, when I got her chapters back, because I collected it all and sent it off to the publisher, her chapters were all 500 words or less because she was writing short for a newspaper, and that's what she was used to, whereas I needed 3,000 to 5,000 words per chapter or whatever it was. Fortunately, I also made a mistake thinking we would only have one chapter on UFO activity in Sudbury, and I ended up having 4, because apparently there's a huge hot history of UFO activity from the 50s, 60s. I broke it down by decades. So I managed to fill it in with stuff I assumed incorrectly when I was putting the book together. Some other things I assumed incorrectly was spooky Sudbury. So it was 85,000 people in the city of Sudbury. It's a big city to me. It's a big city from where I grew up. And then the greater region was 165,000. And then Montreal, which is the second most populous city in Canada with 1.8 million people, my assumption was, okay, Spooky Sudbury did really, really well. It got into its second print run in the first month. I mean, because the first print run was 1,000 copies. But I was still pretty excited because Costco picked it up and locally. And you know, I sold a skid one day when I was there for 8 hours. So when the Montreal book came out, I'm thinking, woohoo, big bucks, right? Because I make $1 every time they sell it because it's co-authored, right? $2 is what I make when it's my own book, but when it's co-authored, we each get $1 every time the book sells. So I'm thinking, Montreal, this is it, baby. It took 3 years to sell copies. I actually sold the year Macabre Montreal was launched, I sold twice as many or 3 times as many copies as Spooky Sudbury, which was like 4 years old at the time. So that was another assumption, bad assumption that I made. More stuff about partnership is, so when you're with a publisher, you're in a partnership. You are both successful if the book is successful and you want to work together with them. You're collaborating, your editor is a business partner with you. You are both trying to make this book the best book it can be. And whether you've hired them yourself as an independent author or you're working with a traditionally published editor, you're in a partnership and you have to recognize that. And then of course you're also partnering with your cover designers and all the various people that you're working with. And then this is where we lead into the next one, is collaborating with your fans. That's one of the most magical, beautiful things you can do, because that leads to patronage. And it's not just about things like Kickstarter and Patreon where you can get money directly from your consumers. It's really about the connection, and it's really about the community, and it's about engagement with that community. And that's where patronage can really be a huge thing for you as an author. Even if you have 1 or 2 fans, that's 1 or 2 diehard fans is better than 1,000 fans who showed up just because you gave away a free product. Because those 1 or 2 fans are going to be the ones that are you think of it as a street team, or they're going to be the ones who are evangelizing your books and you as an author. Really, really important aspect. The other thing that they do is, you know, you get kicked in the face and you get those rejections and the things aren't going right well, stuff like that. They provide you some encouragement, because I can be having a bad day where I'm refreshing my Amazon dashboard and wondering why it's not changed. It's got to be broken. It's not changing. The numbers aren't going up. And then I get an email from someone who says, you know, the story you wrote, I connected with it so well. I had a similar thing happen to me, and I'm so glad you wrote about it. I'm not alone. And that encouragement, which is kind of like them going, you got this. This is good. You're putting stuff out there that's important to me. That kind of encouragement can really help motivate you to keep going. And then the bonus P, the promotion. And this is sort of an aspect. So this is where I said this is the street team. And that can come from the people who are your biggest fans, where you give them early access to your content. You engage with them with your author newsletter as well. I mean, are you guys familiar with the concept of an author newsletter, where people sign up and they get an email from you on a regular basis with updates and stuff? And it could even be pictures of my friend Kevin Anderson, science fiction writer, has 3 cats in the house. And sometimes it's kind of like, well, here's Percival getting in the way of me writing, and is laying on his keyboard and stuff like that. And cat lovers are like, oh, I mean, come on, cats, right? I mean, you either hate them or you love them, but you do have an emotional reaction to them. Sometimes an allergic reaction to them too. But those are the people who are going to be sharing stuff with other people. Rob actually had a newsletter, a physical newsletter once a quarter I used to get as a bookstore manager, and it was so fun to get, because I'm like, I'm getting something cool from Rob, and he's like, look at all the cool things he's doing, and you know, the TV series has been made on this, and here's pictures of him with one of the actors. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. So that newsletter really allows you to become more of a human to your patrons, to your customers, to your fans. This is an example. Richard Lehman was a horror writer that I really admired over the years, and I used to, when I bought this book when I was a bookseller, if somebody came in and they could handle bloody, graphic, nasty horror, I would offer this book with, and this is like sort of early, like this is the early 90s, so pre-internet days, where like the internet was kind of like text-based, not the one that we know today. And I would say if they really liked graphic horror, I would offer them a personal recommendation of the book and say, this is the first book I ever stayed up all night and read. And I read the whole, I'm a slow reader, and I read the whole thing in 4 hours. I could not put the thing down. It is so nasty and scary, and I had to get it finished. What happens is it's raining, and when the rain touches you, you turn into a homicidal maniac. And so it's kind of like zombie-ish, because people are just attacking other people the minute they get hit with rain. So it's really scary. and I would offer a money-back guarantee. I would say, I will personally buy this back from you if you don't like it, if you don't think this is a good book. Richard Lehman actually found out about me and wrote about me in one of his memoirs, one of his books. And there's a Canadian bookseller who offers a money-back guarantee. So like, how did this get to Richard back then? But this was the example of somebody who's such a big fan that they really are putting it in somebody else's hands and selling it. This is the idea of 1,000 True Fans by Kevin Kelly. Now, with other products where you actually make more money, 1,000 True Fans, it may be 5,000 or 10,000 True Fans when you actually do the math for writers, but 1,000 True Fans is a place to start. And I'd rather have 10 True Fans than 1,000 deadbeats who are just taking stuff for free and never purchasing stuff. This is just an example of Alicia Witt, who is an actress, independent musician as well. I love her music. For one of her Kickstarters, I actually got her to write a custom song where I proposed to my now wife, and she performed it live on my 50th birthday, which was kind of a cool thing. But the other thing about doing this promotion and supporting Alicia as well is she actually let me use her, because you can't put lyrics in a book because the Sony and all the record companies and stuff want $10,000, $15,000 just to quote whatever. She let me put lyrics from her independently published songs in the book. She also let me use the audio in the audio version of the book as well. So like the collaboration, this was a partnership, a creative partnership that kind of helped me in my personal life, but also added a really cool element to my book Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, where my character meets Alicia Witt on stage. And I actually sent her the chapter in advance and said, okay, I have you talk to my guy because he's at your concert and whatever. And then she sent it back to me. She says, that's exactly what I would have said in the situation. I'm like, well, I've been to your concerts. I know, I've watched you. I pay attention to you. This is how you interact with people. And so it was just lovely when I got that feedback from her. But the promotion is an aspect that is really, really important, because books, there's so much choice, there's so many opportunities, there's so many things to do besides reading, that promotion is one of those elements that really underlies everything you do as an author, and you kind of have to work at it, whether it's book tours, whether it's purchasing ads, whether it's sending out the author newsletter, whether it's asking for help. That's all parts of promotion, because that's the bonus of the silent P. Some of the pitfalls, I'm just gonna, because I want to get into questions with you guys, some of the pitfalls as well that you, again, because I like the P's in alliteration, just to be aware of is predators. This industry has so many predators who are out there to try and get you, to try to get your money so that you can have your book published and they can have $10,000 in their pockets. If you ever have access to anyone who calls themselves a publisher, one of the first things you should do is just Google the website Writer Beware and go see if they're listed there. Chances are it's too good to be true. And money should always flow to the writer, not from the writer, unless you're self-publishing and you've decided that that's, you're paying the editor, you're paying whatever. But when you pay a publisher, they're not a real publisher. They're somebody who makes their money not selling and publishing books. They make their money selling services to writers to get their books published. That's a different. Analysis paralysis, looking at something too much and not being able to make a choice instead of just getting it down there. Sometimes it's in the craft of writing. Sometimes it's how to publish your book or what to do. And then pennies. So pennies add up. So be careful about the little things you spend. If you're doing ads and stuff and it's a $5 a day ad on Amazon or something like that, can add up, but also pinching them indiscriminately can hurt you too, because I remember with one of my books I was like, I can't really afford to pay too much for an editor, so I'll go with a $500 editor. And then I had to pay twice as much to get the manuscript fixed because I did it wrong the first time, because the first editor was $500, which was more affordable to me, but it didn't help make my book better. It actually made it worse as well. And then perspective, actually being able to talk to other people, step back, and I know your baby's beautiful and stuff like that, but sometimes in the light that it's in, it looks ugly, and you need somebody to help you, adjust the light a little bit on you and your beautiful baby. And then pricing, of course, is another aspect, especially if you're doing it yourself in the pricing of your books. A lot of indie authors really price their books way too low, and they're really shortchanging themselves when you think about the value that a book can bring. And then being too pushy. So instead of worrying about just selling your book today, worry about engaging and connecting with the right people and the right fans. So I write horror, I write ghost stories, I do have books for authors and stuff. But if you come up to me and say, well, what do you write? Well, I have a humorous urban fantasy series with a werewolf, who's, you know, a alpha wolf and beta male, and it's kind of humorous and stuff like that, and I've got some ghost story books, and you're like, well, I really like historical romance. Well, I'm not going to try and sell you my stuff because that's useless. But I'll go, do you know the jewels of historical romance? Oh my God. And one of them's here this weekend. You should go talk to her. That is a better way to connect with a fan, because I lost a sale today. But I may have gained someone over there who says, oh, I have a week later or later that day, they have a friend who's like, I'm looking for some ghost story books. I'm like, oh, that, you know, crazy bald guy over there in the corner, go talk to him. He's your guy. This is, if you can't get enough of me, starkreflections.ca. Just every week for 7 years on Fridays, I release a new episode of the podcast where I talk about the business of writing and publishing. Again, if you want to look for that Cheers video, the Cheers spoof that I did of Mark's Tavern, I'd mentioned to some of you earlier, you can check it out on my YouTube channel, as well as some stuff for writers. But I wanted to open it up to questions. So I've covered, hopefully, a whole bunch of different aspects. But I'm wondering what, if there are specific questions that you want to dig into, because we do have you know, about 6 minutes, I guess. Any specific questions? Yes?
Mark, this was so good, and I just wanted to say we didn't plan this at all, and I hope you don't mind this, but
Yeah.
my session tomorrow on social media is like, it's so much of what you talked about, but in the social media world.
Oh, that's perfect, yeah.
So if you're interested in more of what Mark talked about, but for social media marketing, please come and see me, and we can talk more about what Mark talked about, but specifically about
Social media, which is fantastic. Amanda Potter.
Branding is all about the name.
Yeah. And she has a book on this topic, yes.
Yeah. But this was amazing.
Thank
So
you.
good.
Thank you, Amanda.
How do you determine, you said a $500 editor and a $1,000 editor. How do you determine whether, I mean.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's not just about money,
It's quality. Yeah. So most editors, you do a sample. Most editors you send a sample of whatever length, 1,000 words or a few pages or a chapter, and then they will, for free, send it back to you so you can kind of see. Now, I was also a procrastinator. That's one of the pitfalls of publishing. And I waited to the last minute, so I didn't have time to do the check. And I just like, yeah. And there was somebody that I knew and I wanted to help them out. And I was like, yeah, okay, 500, yeah, let's get her done. But actually checking that back and forth to make sure, A, that this is going to work for both of you, because it is like a relationship. And it's really hard. One of the best ways to find a good editor is through recommendations of other authors. So, you know, other authors who are here and they have a book out and he's like, well, oh, your editor does nonfiction, or your editor writes, was it memoirs that you're interested in, right? Your editor specializes in memoirs? Great. Do they take on new clients? Could you introduce me? That's a great way. And then you can find that sometimes in the acknowledgments of the books, who their editor is, and look them up online. In Canada, I go to editors.ca, and you can see people who specialize in different things, but I do now know enough editors who do different aspects, different genres like nonfiction, fiction, speculative fiction, etc. So I hope that helps. But sometimes you try and it didn't work, and then I learned. And then I progressed. And then I learned, okay, I'm not going to hire that person because it didn't work for me. Maybe it worked for someone else. I don't know. Yeah.
I have a question. My husband and I have a friend that he copies everything for us. Very
Okay.
good.
Oh,
It's
cool.
published.
Oh, good.
Okay, how do we go about self-publishing?
I'll be here to get into that in detail. I do have flyers from Draft to Digital. This is one of the tools you can use. Take your document, your Word document, and have it turned into both a print book and ebook with free templates and stuff like that. Free ISBNs if you need them, and distribution. So that's an easy way. There are also numerous, it gets complicated because then you can go direct to Amazon, and then you can go direct to other retailers. You can go use Ingram Spark, for example, to get the print book, but you need to make the file yourself. So, yeah.
We're not trying to make money on this. We're trying to do it for family. He's going to do
Oh, yeah.
Paul Harvey moments. I write
Yeah.
poetry.
You can do the same thing, but if you want to. So, for example, you can do that. Never distribute it. Have the print file done. Print 10 copies, 5 copies, 1 copy, 20 copies. Never even distribute it online. Have your 20 copies and give them to family. You can also, if you already know how to do the formatting, you can use a local printer for that too.
So
But,
would
yeah.
Amazon still be better than like, we're from well some of
Yeah, you could use Amazon for that, so long as you can use their upload it and print it there, and then just get the copies from Amazon, author copies. That you could do it that way, but
So if we
yeah,
have everything done, and we want like,
Yeah.
we need 40 copies,
yep.
how much would that cost? Or how much
It
do I invest?
depends on the print. Depends on the page count, right? So they'll charge you by page. So the more pages, the more it's going to cost. It's usually pretty reasonable. Like on average, I think one of my books is about 380 pages. I think costs me, I don't know, $6 or $8 per copy or something like that.
How do you
So-
determine your pages? Are you talking about just,
Well, print pages on a print book. So yeah, just like on a print, like how many print pages. So when you load the manuscript in, whether it's the print-ready PDF or the Word document that's been translated, you see the page count. It's like 380 pages. You pay X per page, and then that's usually what they charge.
That's my next question.
Well, that's where it gets really complicated. So black and white, yeah, sure, that's easy and cheap. You want color? Haha, that's going to cost you a lot more. And that's where probably using a professional designer to help you with interior. I know Rob can recommend somebody who's done some books for him, a really trusted person who does some really good work. Again, trusted by someone you know. I know this person too. They do some amazing designs. They design some great T-shirts for me and stuff like that too. So, but that gets really complicated. That's why I'm here for office hours till I think 1 o'clock or something like that. So I can dig into details and we can get into the nitty gritty because it's not a simple answer, unfortunately. So yeah.
Kind of had almost a throwaway comment of, oh, you don't need to buy an ISBN.
Yeah.
You want to communicate.
Yeah, so ISBNs are Bowker runs the international standard book number, which is like a fingerprint for every edition of a book: hardcover, paperback, ebook, audiobook. All have different ISBNs, and you can purchase them $150 each, or you can buy like a batch of them or whatever. But if you publish directly to Amazon, you don't need an ISBN. They use their own internal number anyway. And there are so many services out there like Draft Digital where you can just use their free one, or Kobo has a dummy one they make for you and stuff like that. And it's not, you don't necessarily need to have an ISBN. Now, if you're wanting to get your book onto the bestseller lists and from the sales that are reported from Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the various places and bookstores and stuff like that, having the same ISBN or having different ISBNs for the same book because you use the free ISBNs everywhere is like vote splitting, right? Whereas it's kind of like the vote gets split so you don't sell enough of that one particular ISBN to hit the bestseller list. So that's where it could be important, but it's not absolutely necessary. There are people who make 6 and 7 figures a year who've never paid for an ISBN selling ebooks online only. So I hope, does that answer that a little bit? Because you said you had published.
I did publish,
Yeah.
and I just bought some.
You bought some. That's okay. No, but that's okay. You already invested in that, so take advantage of it. But like, let's say there's a book like, so for example, a book like I do some digital chapbooks, like 3 short stories and whatever. It's like I'm not gonna, even though they're free to me as a Canadian. Sorry, you guys have the right to bear arms. We have the right to bear ISBNs in Canada. We actually do have the right to bear arms and ISBNs. Haha. But that is something that I may not use one of those ISBNs because it still costs time, and I still have to send 2 copies to the National Archives in Canada and all that stuff. I may just use a free ISBN for that ebook and use the ISBNs that I manage under Stark Publishing, which is my company. I'll only use the ISBNs because it's work, it's extra work. So because this is the big book, and I want this to be, I want this to be tracked, and the other ones I just care about the sales or whatever. So I hope that helps. Yeah.
to what extent does an editor say, well, throw out that chapter, or
Different editors have different styles. And for most editors I've worked with, I've usually accepted 90 to 95% of my editors' adjustments, whether they were with a traditional publisher or whether ones I've hired myself. And it's kind of a gut feeling. At the end of the day, it's your story, and if you really feel strongly about something, they're doing their best to advise you. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not necessarily the best thing. You don't know, you just have to play with your gut, but and that's where sometimes this answers. And then this can be wrong, and this can be wrong too, but it happens sometimes. I do have some great notes with some of my where my editor and I got into, this is back in the old days, got into fights in the red lines and sending the manuscript back and forth, and I kept it because this is going to be fun for someone to read one day as we're arguing about something I did that was stupid, and I did ultimately change, but I fought. I even had a great, in one of my books, Tomes of Terror, Haunted Bookstores and Libraries, I'm such a book nerd, I love bookish places. I had a chapter on Haslam's bookstore, which is was an independent bookstore. It was one of the oldest in the US. And the Haslam family was part of like the royalty of the American Booksellers Association. They were parts of founding it, and having been the Canadian president of that association, I was fascinated by all this background of the family and the history and the legacy of bookselling in America. And I went on for 6,000 words. And I was supposed to be writing about the ghost of Jack Kerouac at that bookstore. And my editor says, what the heck is all this? They want a ghost, and you're going on about the history of bookselling. and I'm like, but it's a book about haunted bookstores and libraries. I got to get into it. And I was so passionate. We fought. And I finally relinquished, and I said, all right, I'll cut it, but what can we do? Can we do something else, like an afterword or an appendage? And they came up with the idea. I said, let's do little call-out boxes where we just take some of the information and we put it in a call-out box that people can skip when they're reading. So they just give me the ghost, yay! And then the book nerds like me can get all excited and go, now I want this little sidebar. And we did a bunch of sidebars, and that satisfied me. But what I also did, because I still own the IP to the original version of that, is I did release a book later on that had that full version for the book nerds myself, because the publisher never used that version, so it still belonged to me. Yeah.
But I want to do a memoir, and I want it so my family, three
Yeah.
generations down, then I'd have to go somewhere like Amazon.
Well, you wouldn't have to. You wouldn't have to, but you could put it up there, and there are some legacy things you can do where you can give them your password and stuff, so after you pass on, they can still access that account and make money off your book if people are buying it, which is really important. Yeah, a little envelope. Should something happen to me, here's my Amazon password. So, thank you guys. I did go over time, but I am going to be here for several hours. Yeah, clap, please. Applaud for the camera. So, thank you guys so much.